And that's the thing I hate most about myself when I look back on the trauma of war, is how much I loved it.
A veteran of Vietnam looks back in awe and grief at the young soldier he was and what the war revealed in him.
And about halfway across this clearing, maybe less than halfway across, I hear the laughter of children. And as I look up to where the laughter of these children are coming from, I see them playing around a machine gun.
And on one search and destroy mission, he encounters a nightmare scenario and must make a terrible choice. Hello, welcome to the Mighty Pen Podcast. I'm David L. Robbins, your host and founder of the Mighty Pen Project, a writing program for veterans and their spouses in partnership with the Virginia War Memorial Foundation here in Richmond, Virginia. In this podcast, I'll talk with Malik Hodari, author of today's two stories, Blue Devil 1 and Blue Devil 2. Malik served in Vietnam in 1966 and 67. Malik walked point for his company, and for his actions in these stories was awarded the Silver Star. Now let's listen to Blue Devil 1, powerfully read by David Watkins.
Jungle thicket slows Squad 1's progress. The afternoon monsoon rains fall fast and thick, forcing an hour-long cessation. Blue Devil extends his arm and has difficulty seeing his hand. There are no attacks during these seasonal downpours. No one's dying today. The boys joke with each other. It's a truism. The NVA and the Viet Cong do not initiate assaults when nature calls a brief moratorium on killing. There is no enemy engagement and no fear of it. There is a temporary, eerie peace. Waiting for the rain to subside, sitting under parkas, it's safe to relax, sleep, talk, joke, or fix a meal. Vigilance is not required. Then the rain slows. Sun peeps through the canopy, and the respite ends. Blue Devil resumes whacking through the hilly jungle. He reaches a ravine. The estimated location of the NVA regimental base camp is at least 2.5 days away. Jungle travel time and distance are not measured easily. On the map, the platoons are not far apart and the destination seems close, but on the ground, the undergrowth, foliage, and elephant grass slow travel immeasurably. Ben Yeager is fresh from ROTC, a new second lieutenant. The genteel hillbilly is on his first combat mission. He is assigned to Platoon 2 because Blue Devil is adept at finding the enemy. The company's first sergeant, Grey Wolf, is not a good map reader, but he commands respect. Grey Wolf frequently travels with Blue Devil Squad and leaves the company commander to go with Platoons 1 and 3 who deploy together. Besides the company commander, there are no other proficient map readers in the understaffed company. Platoon 2 is a 17-man operation, short 4 men. The 2nd of the 327th Battalion Commander Thunderball assigns Yeager to Platoon 2 because the unit does not need Yeager's leadership to navigate. He is ambitious, but a slow learner. Blue Devil tells Grey Wolf the unit can make up time here. The route is easier to travel than chopping through virgin brush. Grey Wolf explains the plan to Yeager, who loves the prospect of moving faster. Yeager tells Grey Wolf he wants to impress Thunderball by getting to the NVA camp first. The orders require a coordinated attack on the NVA. If found, the 2nd of the 327th Battalion HQ is to be notified. Then Thunderball will coordinate the assault by radio. He designates deployment strategy so escape routes are sealed because mission success is a career-building bonus. Grey Wolf reminds Yeager that Platoon 2 is the vanguard of the entire battalion. He entreats the over-anxious neophyte to relax, to trust Blue Devil. He'll get us there soon enough. Blue Devil's level-headedness is to be trusted. Squad 1 proceeds down the ravine. The gully floor is sweltering despite the canopy and the recent rains. A familiar sweat soaks the troops' lightweight fatigues. The weight and space in every rucksack is reserved for necessities like ammunition and food, not deodorant. An hour into hacking at the overgrowth, Blue Devil drops his machete and brings his weapon to the ready. He is transfixed. Before him is the khaki uniform of an NVA soldier, brown fatigue hat with a big red star. The soldier's AK-47 and Blue Devil's M16 are muzzle to muzzle. Blue Devil can smell his sweat-soaked enemy. This is a boy. He can't be more than 15. His skin is pimpled and tanned. His eyes are brown. NVA infantry are Chinese-trained professional soldiers who will die before retreating. Blue Devil slackman Guerrero interrupts the stillness and quiet. "What is it, Blue Devil?" Simultaneously, a voice behind the adversary whispers in Vietnamese. The frozen boy's blank face shifts to fear. He turns to flee. Blue Devil breaks the silence to kill him, unloads an entire magazine on automatic. He reloads while chasing other startled NVA soldiers down the ravine, past the dead soldier. He shoots another in the leg. The rest escape, leaving a faint blood trail. After things settle, Blue Devil's squad teases him. They cannot believe he froze. He preaches immediate action, but in the ravine standoff, he hesitated. A shocking response. Months ago, Andy taught Blue Devil to learn to love killing or be a casualty. The day's lapse for the troops is scary. They depend on Blue Devil's aggressiveness. Andy taught Blue Devil to distinguish the smells of each environment for survival clues. When smelling something distinctive, wait for further clues. The enemy may be nearby, above or below ground. Jungle walkers have unique body odors. They cook and discard food with distinct odors. These clues betray human presence. Listen to the animals, to the forest for clues. Birds suddenly flying are evidence an enemy is near. Where they take off may reveal the location. These are interruptions of the jungle's natural order. Blue Devil teaches others these pearls from Andy. His squad mate's confusion about the freeze bothers him. Blue Devil blames the dead soldier's youthful look. He expresses remorse over the kill. Kenny Claypool, the unit grenade launcher and 19-year-old military brat, reminds the small group there are children killing U.S. soldiers everywhere in country. The ravine firefight is evidence that the NVA is patrolling nearby. The second of the 327 reports firefights with Viet Cong and NVA warriors are growing more frequently. Thunderball wants a higher body count, so orders Platoon 2 to set up an ambush. Blue Devil leads a recon mission to find a suitable site where the platoon can set up. Claymore mines are concealed on both sides of the approach to a small hill along an old jungle trail. Blue Devil squad is camouflaged on the hilltop to spearhead the mission. The other 13 men are in teams of 2, spaced 20 to 30 feet apart, extending 200 yards. The silence is deafening. Whispers are not permitted in this hyper-vigilant wait to kill. Hours pass. The Nobody Dies Today rain comes and goes. 30 minutes after the downpour, an NVA infantry unit enters the ambush. Heart racing, Blue Devil resists the temptation to shoot. The enemy's size is unknown. They could overwhelm the undermanned platoon. The enemy's familiarity with the terrain gives them an advantage. The red star on each cap identifies them as more of the professional soldiers encountered yesterday. Fleeing in the face of American forces is uncommon for NVA soldiers. The Claymore mines at the hill's approach will help if there is a large force. Guerrero holds the switch, but Blue Devil, the point man, will determine if it's triggered. Blue Devil alone initiates the attack. He waits until the last enemy passes. He has counted 7 before he starts the assault. M16s blaze along the 200-yard stretch, but there is no return fire, only futile attempts to run into the virgin jungle opposite the assault line. 30 seconds later, the small NVA patrol is decimated. There is no transitory freezing today, no hesitation to kill. Fear wanes, raging adrenaline subsides. The claymores are not used. A traditional perimeter is established to await a counterattack and to communicate with Thunderball. The enemy bodies are strip-searched, mutilated, then left to rot. Legend has it that the Vietnamese have a superstitious fear of the ace of spades. Sharp machetes chop one ear from each carcass. The space is filled with the card. Blue Devil has never before participated in this ugly practice, but inexplicably this time, he grabs the ear of one kill and swings his machete to cut it off. The blade strikes the skull, then bounces off and cuts his hand, drawing blood. It's barbarism, this act, but there is no rule of engagement against it. There is no command against mutilating enemy corpses. Andy railed against it. Blue Devil's trusty blade has served him well, nipping his hand, thus sparing him from taking part. He does not despise the Vietnamese. The lone enemy survivor is another 15-year-old who is treated, then medically evacuated to battalion intelligence. The kills confirm the second of the 327 is near the enemy base camp. Thunderball expresses his pleasure and orders the platoon to resume locating the enemy camp. Platoon 2 returns to the route pursued before the day's tactical detour. Evening approaches, and an exhausted Blue Devil searches for a bivouac spot. Every evening, the unit stops in time to dig shallow foxholes for the night before eating. They never sleep at dusk or dawn. Blue Devil usually conducts a perimeter recon that plots the path forward for the coming day. He is accompanied by the unit's main radio operator, who's an 18-year-old enlistee, plus his slackman Guerrero and Kenny. They form the core group Blue Devil trusts to accompany him on these treks, often venturing far from the night camp. The recon is critical to night safety and to craft the next day's movement strategy. They search for the easiest way forward and for clues to enemy presence. The recon mission patrols 1,500 feet along the bank of the stream south to find a safe crossing spot. They discover why the stream is swollen. 90 yards downstream is a beaver dam built from hundreds of small trees. Below the dam is a perfect fording spot. Blue Devil asks his boys why he sees no evidence of beaver-gnawed trees in the approach on the bivouac embankment. The mystery is unsolved. Blue Devil's attention is focused on the mental checklist he uses for each recon trek. He is not concerned with the beaver activity, but searches for evidence of NVA activity like mines, booby traps, sniper blinds. He searches for signs of imminent danger, of enemy presence. Satisfied there is no threat, the squad rejoins the platoon. Napalm bombing on the campsite of the stream makes it easy to see in most directions. There is no evidence of the bombing on the opposite embankment where the platoon will hunt tomorrow. Napalm burns everything to a black crisp. When the recon team rejoins the overnight encampment, they too dig in. The sun sets behind the napalm destruction, a black, dead forest. The canopy is destroyed and visibility is easy. The group prepares sea rations and gets ready for the night. 30 yards down an old trail, a wild boar eats a kill. The pig is pulling an arm from charred human remains. The arm separates from the charred remains easy as a chicken wing. Blue Devil witnesses this and tells the group. Kenny draws laughter when he says, "That damn pig is eating better than us." Nightfall brings renewed hypervigilance. Showers pounding their parkers make a different sound from the resonance made when rain strikes trees or the ground. Andy had cautioned against underestimating the Vietnamese cunning. This is their land, and they're going to kick our asses out eventually. When they're on the perimeter, they'll use their knowledge of the jungle to wipe us out. Sounds that are different from the jungle stick out like a sore thumb to them. Blue Devil sleeps without a parka cover. He fights the cold, wet night to stay ready. A more immediate threat comes from one of the platoon members. Private Warmth from California goes to sleep on guard duty every night. Each time Sergeant Barnes, a career soldier, hits him in the head with the butt of his M16, Barnes hates Warmth because sleeping on guard duty endangers everyone. Barnes despises him more because Warmth is an educated 23-year-old Northern California aristocrat. Blue Devil, Barnes, and other squad members openly discuss the danger he poses. 2-hour single-man shifts rotate nightly, but the higher risk of enemy attack occurs at dusk and at dawn when there are 2-man vigils. Warmth dozes on any shift. He is afraid, so he sleeps. Tension between the two escalates beyond the tipping point. Barnes wants to survive and is prepared to beat compliance into warmth or make him a friendly fire casualty. Blue Devil and Kenny share Warmth's night guard duty to help him stay awake and keep Barnes at bay. On duty overnight, Warmth confesses he does not shoot at enemy soldiers in combat. He shares this news in confidence but misreads Blue Devil. Blue Devil accepts Warmth sleeping because Warmth is fearful, but he sees that the man is not shooting at the enemy. At 4 a.m, camped on the bank of a dammed stream near overflow from the monsoons, Blue Devil plucks leeches from the inside of his chest and off his legs and neck. Leeches thrive in the wet climate. They suck blood until they explode. Blue Devil has a scar under his heart, a reminder that these tiny creatures must be removed. Insect repellent or fire counteracts the bloodsuckers, but neither works during a deluge. Barnes is right. Warmth has to go. He tells Warmth, "Today I'm telling the squad and Barnes about your fucking pathetic ass." Allowing Warmth to remain is suicide. Reporting him means a court-martial and maybe a dishonorable discharge. Still, to Warmth, being reported is a fate better than dying in Vietnam. He's dead weight, literally and figuratively. Before the unit leaves, Warmth asks, "Nobody's dying today?" Blue Devil stares through him before replying, "Warmth, you're a leech."
Malik, thanks for joining me from Chicago, yeah?
Yes, in Chicago.
All right. Malik Hodari, author of Blue Devil 1 and Blue Devil 2. Before we get to your stories, specifically Blue Devil 1, Malik, you joined the military at a young age. You were a young black man in St. Louis. What put you in the military? Why did you join?
Well, it's a long story that I'll make short. There was conflict at home. My stepdad was a military man, a 24-year military man. And we never got along. And I didn't get along that well with my mom either. So to escape home, I volunteered to become a paratrooper, knowing that I would go to Vietnam. I knew the old man didn't want to go to Vietnam. He was an admin guy. So I figured if I could go to war and prove myself in war, I'd be a much better soldier than him. So I decided to stick it to him by going to war.
Oh, brother. I'm sure that that's not an uncommon story among young men, and perhaps young men of color of your generation.
Right. Most of the guys, though, most of the black guys I knew were drafted. Tons of draftees. And when I got to Vietnam, all of my outfits were predominantly black. Some volunteered, but most of them were drafted. These are guys who didn't go to college, who didn't seek deferments. They just waited. They were unemployed anyway, half of them. And so when Uncle Sam came calling, they went. But I volunteered.
And when you got there, did you get what you were looking for?
Listen, I got a real quick story to tell you. I don't know if I've ever told you.
All right.
A friend of mine that I grew up with, we lost contact at around age 15 to 17. I was 19 when I went to Vietnam, and he got on the plane that I got off of. When I arrived in Vietnam, my arrival plane, he took to go back to the States. And he had volunteered to go as well. He loved my old man, and he wanted to be like my old man, the sergeant major. And he ended up being like him. But he was coming from the 101st Airborne Division where I was going. And he told me that day, in that brief meeting, "You're going to love this."
And
that's the thing I hate most about myself when I look back on the trauma of war, is how much I loved it. And I did love it. It was nothing like killing.
Yeah. Now I know this about you. I know that you grew up in the shadow of a slaughterhouse.
Right.
And I've always been moved by that story. You once said to me that you had grown up with the sounds of killing, and that it was a thought of yours even as a young age, and that when you were called to do it and experience it in war, wasn't so traumatic for you.
No, not at all. Not until years later when I look back on what I'd done. Where we grew up, I was next door to a packing house. My grandparents owned a 3-story house next door to Howell Packing Company. The experience of killing river rats, chasing river rats for fun, and my brother Fuzzy and I, we loved killing. And then you watch the slaughter of pigs every day from 3 to 3. They would wake me up at the middle of the night at 3 in the morning. When you hear those pigs squealing, going to slaughter, you can't sleep through it. So at 3 a.m. and 3 p.m., they would have the slaughters at the packing house next door. So it was, I was used to killing.
So when you got to Vietnam, you carried this in your head. In a little while, I'm going to ask you where your head is now, because I know you're a brother to me and you're a good man, and I want to give you the chance to tell us where you are now. But let's talk about Blue Devil 1 first.
Okay, great.
Blue Devil 1 takes us into the jungle very early on in your deployment. As you say, young black man, 19 years of age, come there to escape tough circumstances at home. And you are faced with the jungle and an enemy and a firefight. And then you encounter a young man named Warmth, who could not be more opposite from you because he will not kill.
Right. The way this happened in Blue Devil 1 is situated, I'm trying to explain to readers how I actually became Blue Devil. There was a sergeant named Anderson who took a liking to me almost from the beginning of my arrival at the 101st Airborne. When I got there, at the time, I didn't know why, but this guy basically took me under his wing, taught me how to walk point. His theory was that you never hit the dirt when you're fired upon, you always assault. And so he told me the first time I hit the dirt, he would kick me in my ass. And that was the only time. After that, he'd shoot me. And the first time we're assaulted, sure enough, the defensive mechanism kicked in and I hit the dirt, and my tailbone hurt for 2 weeks from the kick that he put on it. So then after that, he taught me how to read a map with a compass. I mean, he was an expert at this, and he passed those skills on to me. In fact, the day he decided not to come back to the field was a day we had an argument with the lieutenant and the sergeant over where we were. And I identified where we were. I told him to shoot an azimuth to that depression, and that he just realized where we were. And he did. And he said, well, you're ready. And so he never came back. And the reason he never came back was he had been in the Army for 6 years. He wanted to make a career out of it, but Vietnam changed his mind. And so his survival instinct was to take an Article 15 and get a reduction in rank each time he refused to go back to the field. And he got 6 or so of those. He was an E6 and he was an E1 when he left Vietnam to go home. The officers loved him. They weren't about to give him a dishonorable discharge because everything he did was honorable, including the way he refused to go back to the field. He trained his replacement. And so that was how I got the skills to survive in Vietnam from Andy.
You, Malik Hodari, were in the first class of the Mighty Pen Project in 2015. That's when we met.
Right.
And you were the first veteran with whom I explored telling your story through third person. You and I had a conversation where you said it's hard, right?
It's painful.
Yeah. And we inserted this notion of doing it through the device of third person. And you wrote Blue Devil from that distance, from the distance of not being the first person, not being the I. I've used that technique with several other people that you and I explored and that you executed, I think, so beautifully. That helps the listener understand why this story is not I, but third person Blue Devil.
Well, you remember how I came to Mighty Pen. I was in therapy at the VA with Dr. Brian Meyer. When he saw your ad, he called me right away and told me I should I should contact you. And the first day we were in class, you tell everyone that this class is not devoted to therapy.
But it's not anyone's place to tell you or anyone that sits in those seats or any veteran who's worn the uniform to tell them what to write about. And the reason why these stories are so powerful and your work is so powerful is because the Mighty Pen is all about giving you the skills and the tools and the confidence and the community. And then we leave the catharsis and the healing to you and your comrades in the class. I would never presume to ask you how it feels or how it felt or where your head is in a classroom. I just say, Malik, these are the writing skills to tell your story.
The camaraderie between veterans of World War II. We had a World War II veteran in class, Gennaro.
Guy de Gennaro.
And each war, you're dealing with equals because these are people who've been in the combat and know what combat's like. So it's easy for you to talk about or tell your story to the class. It's the difficult part was learning the conventions that you taught us on POV, point of view, and all of that business. But each veteran in there knew what you were trying to say in your story and would tell you how to write it. That feedback was just tremendous.
I'm glad you weren't there the night Guy came up to me. Guy was like, 92 or 93 when he says, David, it's good that you didn't serve. You're serving now. And I said, well, thank you, Malik. Guy, that means a lot to me, but why is it good that I didn't serve? He says, because you just spent it all in the brig. All right, real quick, talk to me about Warmth, because he leads us into Blue Devil 2 in a moment. You got a guy in your squad. Here's this young man, Blue Devil, who's accustomed to the notion of confronting the enemy with, fatal force. And then you've got a guy who won't do it. How does that work? What's the dynamic of that at the squad level and the personal level?
At the squad level, he was a danger to everyone's survival. The sergeants, the corporals, everyone in the command structure above him wanted him dead. And they were willing to kill him because he was better off dead than he would go to sleep on guard duty. If an enemy came through his post, we were all dead, but he didn't want to kill. He wasn't afraid to be there. He wasn't afraid to be killed. He was not a coward. He just refused to kill. And I understood that about this guy because I grew up in a religious home. So I had compassion for Paul Warner. And I would stay up with him at night while he performed his guard duty so that when the sergeants came around to check, they wouldn't try to beat him to death because he was asleep. And oddly enough, when I was there, he would stay awake and talk all night. The day of the assault, he finally gets relief from being in the war. He shoots himself in the foot. He's behind a boulder and he just shot himself in the foot. And we didn't care. I begged the battalion commander not to give him a discharge, dishonorable discharge, and not to, he just couldn't get a Purple Heart because he shot himself. And he ended up getting an honorable discharge.
But
he was in fatal danger.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. And that's my only compassion in the war.
Well, I fully believe that anybody who stayed up with you on watch stayed awake talking all night. Now our second story, Blue Devil 2, again, read by David Watkins. Then I'll talk more with author Malik Hodari.
Dark clouds persist after a light morning rain. The platoon passes the beaver dam, then fords at the spot recon identified last night. Just beyond the west bank of the dam stream, hundreds of tree stumps reveal the dam's construction. Gnawed stumps stretch in a straight line north and east over 200 yards to form a fan-type clearing parallel to the stream. Blue Devil avoids crossing the clearing here, but leads the platoon north inside the tree line near the bank. Satisfied there's no danger, he turns right, crouches like a lion, and stalks across. Blue Devil motions for Slackman Guerrero to wait. The gesture requires Guerrero to delay a gap of 10 feet before following. The platoon performs this maneuver in every open field crossing. In turn, each man gives the same silent motion before crouch walking into the open space. The slack man is also obliged to scour the left, the opposite direction of the point man. The third man searches a zone similar to the point but farther to the right. The fourth man searches farther left of the slack man. It is right-left spacing duty that creates overlapping search fields. Properly performed, the unit's eyes cover the 180-degree expanse. In an open space assault, the men flank to the right or left based on their right-left spot in line. Blue Devil silently signals fan out by extending his right forefinger, then his left. The soldiers race to their zones in a frontal assault. Each notifies the next to fan out. Before leaving bivouac, they softly sound off right or left so that each knows where to assemble. Blue Devil asks every soldier his position. Since Warmth confesses that he will not shoot at the enemy, Blue Devil assigns the second left assault position to Paul Zuck. Warmth swaps to the rear. Placing Warmth at the rear is risky, but forces him to fight or die. Blue Devil hears youthful laughter. He sees Vietnamese playing with children. He slows, stalks lower, scours the area at 2 o'clock where the clearing ends. He hurries his assault gestures and, when done, fires his grenade launcher into the area of the laughter. Body parts fly. He advances, rushing to keep the advantage. He empties his M16 on automatic. While firing, he ejects the grenade shell, then reloads. Blue Devil steadies the weapon with his left hand, shoots another grenade, then reloads the M16. He fast breaks to position. The fleeing enemy frantically grab bodies during their fallback. Amid the chaos, they return fire. The onslaught presses. Blue Devil sees the entire battlefield like Willie Mays sees the seams of a pitch. One of his grenades blows a body in half. The enemy drags it in retreat. The point man has never seen this behavior in combat. Blood is everywhere. The enemy scurries. Hundreds of men, women, and children. Peripheral view left, peripheral view right. In the adrenaline rush, Blue Devil leaps over a 50 caliber machine gun. In mid-leap, he barks assault directions to his men. He empties another automatic magazine. Trees temporarily prevent using his grenade launcher. He sees the main trail, wide as 5th Avenue, busy. The dirt is red, littered with arms, legs, intestines, brains. The enemy is escaping. A grenade opening appears. Destruction again, more blood. He barks more directions. The sanctum is huge, teeming with life. Scores of abandoned weapons, cooking pits, clay pots, sleep stations, half-dressed humanity fleeing. Blue Devil yells for Terry and Ray. The camp center is big enough for an outdoor track. He needs the machine gunner and his assistant for cover. The men don't come or answer. Blue Devil yells for Terry and Ray again. He searches to his rear. The entire platoon lays in the grass. They cling to tree stumps. He stops the assault. Keeping both eyes on the enemy, he creeps back 50 feet to the machine gun. He turns to his men, screams and waves for them to come. Their response is slow. Behind him, the enemy retreat goes on. The enemy is not shooting, but only covering their escape. Blue Devil soldiers creep to their feet, crouching to avoid phantom bullets. Screaming to the heavens, he commands, "They're getting away! Get your asses up here! We need the machine gun to advance! Get up here!" 3 speed up. Blue Devil jerks his head around to the rear again. He wants to engage the fleeing enemy. He waits for his platoon, for his machine gunner, for his slack man, for the enemy to take it all back. The platoon arrives slowly. They rave about the assault. They heard bullets zipping overhead. How did Blue Devil shoot like that? This machine gun is awesome. It is insane babble. He gives them directions to spread out, to establish a perimeter, to protect against a counterattack. Yeager is mute. His terror-filled eyes surrender leadership. Pressed to duty, the men deploy. They go past blood and body parts, eyes wide, mouths agape. They hesitate to enter the camp center. Dark clouds persist. No sun nor rain. A rock cave on the left of the clearing has an entrance 2 stories high. The platoon tosses in hand grenades before entering. There are hundreds of weapons in the cave, too many to spot inventory. They find automatic Russian AK-47s, mortars, Chinese stick grenades, pistols, sniper rifles, ammunition of every type. The grenades do not blow the ammunition. Blue Devil reprimands 2 soldiers for prematurely using the explosives. Jaeger brags it was his order. The post-fight silence creates hair-raising echoes. The mind bounds from fear to fear. Next to the cave, a blood trail raises up a 100-foot ravine. A smaller stream of blood trails away east. Terry and Ray guard the road with a machine gun. Can the platoon withstand a counterattack? Maybe a retreat to last night's bivouac site would be wise. The first sergeant and Blue Devil advocate retreat. They want Thunderball notified. Jaeger wants to give his commander a higher body count. The lull in the fighting seems to have awakened the young lieutenant. Heroic possibilities sleep here. He orders Blue Devil to pursue the heavier blood trail. The trek up the steep hill is deliberate, duly cautious. At the top stands a boulder 200 feet tall and twice as wide. Blue Devil leaves the 3-man recon team behind the boulder where the blood trails intersect. He belly crawls across blood-soaked leaves. He sees blood-stained tree stumps extending west into the uncut jungle. Scores of sheared stumps create a rectangular field. 100 yards to the tree line, 20 yards across. The retreating enemy is visible in the thicket. Too many to count. The overcast day projects a gray tone like an old television show over the enemy. Blue Devil's vantage point is not good. He considers shooting a grenade, but that will betray him. He crawls backward to the boulder to tell his men what he saw. They plead with him to return to camp. He needs a better assessment. He crawls around the boulder for a safer view of the thicket from sparse cover. He inches behind the nearest tree. AK-47s crackle. Blue Devil jerks back his head. He goes motionless. A hail of bullets strike the tree. More zip by. The crackling continues. The enemy seems to be trying to fell the tree by shooting. The hill slopes below him. There is safety lower. He slides down 2 feet, still needing to assess the odds of a counterattack. The enemy is small-statured as they treat their wounded. Blue Devil could launch grenades, but this is war, not suicide. Time flies. This is taking too long. The enemy is not running, they are waiting. Blue Devil crawls to the team where he greets panic-stricken eyes. The young radio operator is in tears. Guerrero repeats Hail Marys in Spanish. Blue Devil gives his squad the assessment. He observed an enormous contingent. Some of the enemy treat the wounded, others flee, many wait. Leave them alone, Kenny blurts. Please, please, Guerrero chirps in his native tongue. He seems to forget the team only speaks English, but the message is clear. Blue Devil tells them to pray there is not a counterattack. He assures his men they will not follow the blood trail. Screw Jaeger. The men implore Blue Devil to rejoin the platoon. He takes the radio mic to call Jaeger. White Fox, there's a skyscraper boulder. Beyond is a kill zone, like the approach. Request permission to return to your ballpark. No, damn it. I told you to pursue that blood trail. Get me a body count. The platoon huddles. Blue Devil asks why the unit is not ready for a counterattack. Jaeger says the platoon will chase the enemy. He assigns a different point man, Paul Zuck. Blue Devil is to bring up the rear, not warmth. The lieutenant's tone is nasty, condescending. Blue Devil has heard that tone before, from cops in the neighborhood, from store clerks fearful he is a shoplifter, from bus drivers and riders moving him to the rear. He checks his emotions. Lives are at stake. Blue Devil pleads for counterattack defense. He tells the lieutenant that their death waits beyond that boulder. He shares details of what he saw. The enemy is retreating, but also waiting. There are scores of tree stumps, a kill zone. You heard the AKs. I was pinned behind a tree. Jaeger turns away. Blue Devil looks at the first sergeant, who shrugs. Orders are orders. The men move. As they pass, some look puzzled, others terrified. Blue Devil tells them all, be careful. Catastrophe waits. There's a boulder, tree stumps, and ambush. Urgency is in Blue Devil's voice, close to panic. He needs them alive. He begs, be careful, be careful. He returns to the lieutenant. Secure the camp. Wait for reinforcements. He explains the wait for help is going to be longer than map views suggest. He reminds Yeager there are no unit casualties, that every man is needed to hold the camp. He warns that Thunderball will not be happy if the weapons cache left unattended is lost. Yeager pauses. His eyes dart up and down, back and forth. He orders the recon team to stay, to guard the weapons, to defend against a counterattack. He marches the other 12 men up the hill. The platoon passes the Boulder Ravine Junction, then follows the blood trail left. They pass red-stained stumps. Yeager orders a frontal assault. AK-47s crackle again. Quickly, 5 soldiers are knocked down, maybe killed. The others run for cover. Most are pinned down behind stumps. A few retreat to trees right of the boulder. Clarence Way, the radio operator, is killed following an order to bring the mic to Yeager behind a different tree. Way is green. Less than a month in country, he recently turned 18, shot in the chest. He radios for help while dying. Blue Devil rushes to Way's distress message. Warmth cowers alone behind the boulder. Rivers of tears roll over his half smile. He points to his right foot where a wound bleeds. You're not getting a Purple Heart for shooting yourself, Paul. Way's dead. I'm hit, screams Barnes. First Sergeant Grey Wolf yells, we need Puff or we need an airstrike. The urgency in his shouts belies his normal cool. Puff is an assault helicopter that will spew 60 caliber machine gun fire with a tracer every 5th round. The tracers glow fire red. They will appear to be a stream of fire from chopper to target, so the nickname Puff the Magic Dragon. Grey Wolf screams like God is dead. We're gonna die without air fire! We are gonna die without air fire! Blue Devil directs the platoon to fire at the distant jungle. He races 30 feet into the tree stumps to pull Sergeant Barnes to safety. He tells Barnes that Warmth is wounded. Barnes says he knows the motherfucker shot himself at the junction. Blue Devil returns to the kill zone where he pulls another soldier to safety, then another. He calls for Puff support. They survive for 20 minutes until the dragon arrives. The platoon tosses smoke grenades to mark their position. Puff strafes beyond the smoke. Enemy fire continues. The first sergeant yells for more air support. He's still prone behind a stump. There are no smoke grenades left. Blue Devil radios coordinates. Platoon first, then enemy. Air Command demands confirmation. The proximity bothers them. Drop it now! A test bomb falls beyond the tree line. The ground shakes. Fire for effect! Fire for effect! Yeager continues to shrink behind his small tree. The monsoon never intervenes. The sun never shines. Dusk arrives. The siege ends. Radio traffic confirms help is coming. Firefights in thick jungle delay their arrival. Frequent skirmish reports pour in from other units. The battalion plan works. Midnight passes. A unit is heard slashing through distant brush. 2 hours later, the company commander breaks through with 2 platoons. They describe ambushing the retreating enemy. Afraid to use lights for assistance, the reunited company waits for dawn before they depart. The stench of Way's decomposing blood makes a permanent place in Blue Devil's brain. A friend passes the night with guts in hand. The medic arrives with the company commander. In the dark, he administers morphine. The friend groans on. Blue Devil sits a night vigil with his wounded warrior. Another company arrives at dawn. Perimeter guards are plentiful. They rotate on 2-hour shifts. The enemy is never far away. By radio, the company commanders confer with an engineer. They agree a landing zone is impractical. A hover zone for transfers is blown using C4 to fell more trees. The task begins at noon and takes hours. Additional C4 is lowered by helicopter. When the hover zone is finished, choppers bring ammunition, supplies, and hot meals. 3 intelligence officers arrive to assess the weapons cache. Manufacturer sources may aid future decisions. They are fluent in Mandarin, Russian, and Vietnamese. The lowering and raising of men and supplies is perilous and painstaking. A tow line from each hovering chopper lowers a loaded metal stretcher that is unpacked. then reloaded with the wounded and hoisted to the ship. Next, the dead transfer. There is no field ritual, no open grief, no prayer. The last helicopter takes warmth. He is not permitted to ride with the wounded or the dead. Instructions that he is Purple Heart ineligible are radioed to staff. Night falls again. The star-bedecked sky is close enough to touch, a pearl of beauty. 19 years she waited for Blue Devil to adore her. The sky over Vietnam is a source of brief and silent solace. The presence of two companies is comforting too, like the heaviest monsoon. The next morning, airlift shuttles resume. More hot meals arrive. Blue Devil is authorized the war trophy. He chooses a Chinese sniper rifle. It is tagged with his name and serial number to ship to the 101st Phan Rang base camp. Intelligence catalogs the weapons cache, which is shipped to the forward base. Explosives seal the rock cave. The task takes 2 days. On the third afternoon, Thunderball visits. He commends the platoon for capturing the camp. The weapons cache is a distribution operation, a historic find. He announces an enemy body count north of 100. He's jovial. He expresses pride for his association with the 1st Brigade. He is happy the 101st legacy grows in Vietnam. He announces a memorial service to take place when the unit stands down in a few days. Blue Devil fights tears. He detests the custom. A bayonet-mounted M16 is planted between a pair of boots. A camouflaged helmet tops the rifle butt. The symbolic soldiers are lined up like crosses in Flanders Field. A standard eulogy praises freedom's new martyrs. Taps blow. Pandora's box opens. Tears gush in. Memories find refuge. There's never healing, just pain. Emotions are survival's mortal enemies. Thunderball mingles with the men, drinking coffee, small talking. He departs with his intelligence officers. Grey Wolf and Thunderball are old friends. The first sergeant learned that Jaeger will be removed and replaced with a West Point graduate during the stand-down. The revelation is a temporary morale booster. There are wagers over the number of days before the enemy returns. Kenny and Ray tease Paul Zuck with a song. Zuck's going home in a plastic bag. Doo-dah, doo-dah. Zuck's going home in a plastic bag. Yeah, da-doo-dah-day. The object of this group folly shifts from hour to hour, day to day. 72 hours later, after 26 days of search and destroy, second of the 327 stands down.
We're back with Malik Hodari, author of Blue Devil 1 and Blue Devil 2. Blue Devil 2, Malik, is essentially a continuation. Blue Devil 1, it's the same characters, Warren Few. It revolves around a search and destroy mission that the leadership was seeming to want to maximize or exploit, whereas perhaps the facts on the ground did not dictate that. And correct. You, as the point man, would know the facts on the ground better than they. It is essentially a story about leadership, isn't it?
Absolutely. Or the lack thereof.
Yeah. Talk to me about...
There's a leadership board.
Yeah.
It has to be filled, David.
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay. Look, we spend the night next to a stream. The canopy is just destroyed by napalm. So you can see clearly what's happening. And it's also during the monsoon season. So twice a day, it rains so hard, you can hold your hand out and you can't see your hand. That's the only period where we would have a respite from combat is when during the monsoon, because if you can't see your hand, the enemy can't see their hand. He's not coming after you and you're not going after him. You're just going to wait out the rain. Then on the stream where we were embanked, you could see tree stumps, and it looked like the work of the beaver. The next day, when we go out, is when we come to a clearing where it appears that, this is where the beaver felled at these trees. And about halfway across this clearing, maybe less than halfway across, I hear the laughter of children. And as I look up to where the laughter of these children are coming from, I see them playing around a machine gun. And I see a machine gun, and I see an adult. But these children are laughing and playing like others going, and I give the command, the hand command signals to the guys behind me that we're getting ready to assault. You can't talk. And I couldn't take my eyes off of what I was watching. Once I gave the hand signals, I started the assault. I had an over and under, what they called an over and under. It was an M15 with an M79 grenade launcher attached to the bottom. And the first thing I did was shoot the M79 grenade launcher right where those kids were playing with this adult at that machine gun. And then I unloaded the M16 and I went forward with the assault, thinking that my guys are with me. You reload the M79 while you're unloading your M16 magazine, and you just drop it there in the field, and you assault. And then next thing I knew, I was on the stoop where the dead were, children, and I look back, and I'm alone. None of my guys are with me. I made this assault all alone. The hair on my neck stood up because we knew we were chasing an NVA regimental base camp. That's what we were searching for. And I could tell when I got past the clearing that we were inside this base camp, and it was huge. I mean, it was golly. I had never seen anything that huge in my life. And I called for our guys to come. If the NVA who were fleeing, if they knew I was alone, if they knew it was only 17 of us, which eventually I know they figured out, they would have had a counterattack. Well, once we got in there, my spidey sense says, don't follow the blood trails. Let's just secure this place for a counter assault. We have a brand new lieutenant. This gets to your initial question. We have a brand new lieutenant straight out of ROTC from Springfield, Missouri. Someone told him that he was smart enough to lead men into combat. This guy was as dumb as a rock. When he saw the blood trail, he wanted a body count. I knew that this was nuts. And I also knew that the battalion commander was listening. His call sign was Thunderball. And so when we were having this back and forth over the radio, and I'm requesting permission to come back, there was a guy named Guerrero who spoke good English, but he's saying Hail Marys in Spanish, man. I don't even know Spanish, but I can hear this guy going over and over. He's out loud. He's saying Hail Marys, full of grace. Lord, I mean, he knows he's getting ready to die. And the other guys are looking at me like, when he says come back, he tells me, no, follow the blood trail. When Thunderball, the battalion commander, hears that he wants us to follow the blood trail and there's so few of us, he tells us to go back. By the time Thunderball is finished saying go back, we're down the ravine back at the base camp. We ran back. He then took those 13 guys who were left the 4 guys who went up at the base camp, took the 13 guys up, walked and forced them around the rock, the boulder, into the kill zone. And we lost people. We had guys shot and wounded. Then he called for help. And the only people who could come to help him were these 4 guys who were at the base camp. So we went up, and then I pulled out the guys who were wounded and dead back to cover, and called in an airstrike because the lieutenant didn't know how to call in an airstrike. So I called in an airstrike because otherwise we would have been dead. And that's pretty much what happened that day. Our radio operator, who was a close friend of mine, died that day. And I spent the night in a position with him and 2 other guys who were wounded, and the smell of dead blood, which lingers in my nostrils to this day.
What was it in the officers that cost men their lives? Was it hubris?
I would absolutely say it was hubris, because you can't think you know everything just because you got a yellow bar and the other guys out there are below you in rank. So it was he never went back to combat. Let me put it that way. And 2 days later, when the battalion commander came out to take pictures of what we had found and, to get all the credit he needed for his battalion finding this regimental base camp, the battalion commander told me, "Don't worry, you'll be coming in for a stand down soon, and he won't come back."
Malik, I wanted to give you a chance to tell us where your head is today after these experiences. Where's Malik Hodari today?
Well, David, I've been through a lot of therapy, and then I also meditate daily for 2.5 hours. And I do volunteer work at the Science of Spirituality here in the Metro Chicago neighborhood, Lisle, Illinois. So I think I'm coming around slowly, but it has been a process. I've had numerous failed marriages and 5 drunk driving charges later. I haven't had one in the last 20 years, but that was, that's where I was, and where I am is hopeful and helpful for humanity. I just want to say one thing, that I know from our discussions that there are not a lot of Black participants in the Mighty Pen Project or telling their stories, period. And I just want to say to the veterans out there who know Black veterans, male or female, that it's not a daunting task, that it's pretty easy to learn your story. And it's important to archive your story for your own families. They have this DNA, all these DNA sites where you can go and find out what your genetic ancestry is. But it's important for your families and the families of the nation to know the stories of Black veterans as well. And I think it's important that we encourage Black veterans to participate in the Mighty Pen Project. There's not one bit of racism in the teaching or in the cataloging of the stories, and even if your story isn't chosen for cataloging, it's still important for your family to have it.
Well, I speak for the Mighty Pen and for the Virginia War Memorial in this, that our arms are wide open to all veterans of all walks and all experiences. And Malik, it has been such an honor to know you and be your friend. And thank you for your courage in telling those stories today. And hopefully we'll have more, man. Yeah. Thank you, brother. Be well.
All right.
The Mighty Pen Project is a free writing program for military veterans and their spouses offered by the Virginia War Memorial, a 501c3 nonprofit. If you'd like to learn more about the Mighty Pen, or sign up for one of our writing classes on Zoom, or just send us your thoughts, email us at mppodcast@vawarmemorial.org, or use the link in the podcast description. If you want to read today's stories and many more, use the link to go to the Mighty Pen Archive. And if you enjoy this podcast, please follow us and share it. Music for this episode was provided by Miles Black from the VCU Arts Department of Music. If you'd like to support the Mighty Pen, follow the charitable donation link in the podcast description. I'm David L. Robbins, and I want to thank you for listening to the Mighty Pen Podcast. It's an honor.